All right, so very happy to be joined by the dynamic duo of Fenu Health, the Madden sisters. It's how are you guys getting on?
Good, good.
Good.
Good. It's well, guys. Honestly, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us here. It's we're really trying to just highlight just some of the success stories coming off the back of young scientists, and I think it goes without saying that Fenu Health is one of those prime examples, especially over the past few years, of mixing science and tech with entrepreneurship. So thanks very much for coming along. It's I suppose we'll jump straight in, and Annie, I might come to you first if that's okay. Back in 2015, if I'm not mistaken, was
Yep.
when Fenu Health as a young scientist project was born. It's and obviously you did very well in competition, placing second in the entire overall scheme of things. So off the back of that famous young scientist year, what happened next? How was Fenu Health born?
Well, it happened pretty quickly, I think, at the start. Like, we won our prize on the Friday night, and then the Saturday morning, I think it was Kate, you got the call from um a person from he was actually calling from Shanghai, and he was an owner of like one of the biggest kind of horse feed companies in the world, and he was like, "Oh, this sounds really good what you're doing, and I've looked into your project." And we were like, "Oh, stop, people actually read it." Like, so we were a bit shocked. And then so then that actually we developed a relationship with him just over the next few months after the Young Scientist, and we ended up traveling out to Germany with him in March of that year of 2015. And like, we had no intention of setting up a business from Young Scientists at all. Like, we purely just did it for the fun, for the science, like make a few friends. Like, that was the only reason behind it. And then yeah, then we just started to see that maybe there was the potential for a business there. And then just we went once we went over to that trade fair in Germany, just started to see that maybe we could kind of come up with something as well and do it too. And it really just started there and then grew very quickly. I think you'd agree, Kate.
Yeah, so it kind of like snowballed from there, as we could say. So we went to Germany, then we kind of got inspired, let's say, and we decided like how we wanted to branch out, how we wanted to get new products, put them out in the market. And like, we were only 13 and 14 at the time. So like, it was all very new to us. We were kind of working off junior cert business and first year German when we went to Germany. But other than that, like, it all kind of snowballed and we just kind of kept going. And that's how we ended up what we've done today.
Well, I think I can safely say that for the vast majority of people, getting phone calls from Shanghai is not something that they would be accustomed to, least of all at 13 and 14. Now, you both mentioned there how it just snowballed, and I suppose how, like a lot of these successful projects, there's just that inflection point and things just change massively for you guys. Now, I know in a land before COVID, each and every one of us past participants of the Young Scientists will be well used to pitching the idea and chatting about the idea in person at our own version of trade stands. But transferring that into the real business world of international horse fairs, into actual enterprise trade stands, how do you feel that the two of them matched up? How do you feel that the Young Scientists prepared you for those sorts of presentations?
Yeah, I feel like the Young Scientists definitely helped us prepare for that, in the fact that it taught us how to be confident in our work, and it taught us like how to present it and how to explain it in simple English to people that didn't understand what it was all about. So when we were trying to convert our science idea into the business, it really came down to those like core principles that we learned of keeping it simple, like explaining it as it is, and just kind of like educating people about the process and about like what our products did. And it was like explaining the science behind it. And like, I think people take much more credit towards new companies and products when they see science behind it, and especially because we were so young, that we had BT and the Young Scientist in behind us as well. It definitely gave us like a good bit of credibility when we were going out into the big business world.
I can imagine it's coming anywhere in a competition as good as the Young Scientist is pretty noble, but I suppose at that young an age and in such an interesting area, as you said, perfectly combining science and business into creating that enterprise. And I suppose you did a fairly good job at those trade stands and those trade fairs across the world, considering the fact that you have customers that are royal families, that you're operating in God only knows how many countries at this stage. I suppose, and again, it's a lot of students may be wondering, how do you balance academic work along with all this sort of globalized notions, all this sort of crazy things you guys are doing with Venue Health?
I think it was definitely really helpful that there was two of us. Like the fact that if I was really busy, I could just hand something off to Kate or vice versa. I think that definitely really helped us because obviously we're both still like we're both in college now, both in UCC. So like it's definitely still a lot of work in that front. But I think definitely having two of us was a huge advantage. And then just the fact that like we had an interest in it, like we wanted to do it. I feel like that was really important. Like if it was kind of something you're only just doing for the sake of doing, you probably wouldn't persevere as long and really put as much effort into it. But I think we had a real interest in it and we really wanted to be doing it like whenever we had the time, like whenever we had a spare minute, we were spending it on it because we wanted to.
Yeah, definitely having two of us being able to balance it, especially like when we were in school, when we were doing the Young Scientist, I was preparing for the junior cert. Annie was in first year. So we were like, from the beginning, we were learning how to like offload work to each other and how to balance it all together, which has really helped, especially now that we're both in college and doing the business.
Mm-hmm. So obviously having two people in the project initially starting out is really good for sharing the workload. How do two sisters focus when there may be some form of disagreement on a project or when there's two people working on that back in the Young Scientist days? And more so, how does that translate now? It's how do you guys, I suppose, bounce off each other and maintain that efficiency?
Yeah, so when we did the Young Scientist, the first thing we did was splitting up the roles. Like we decided who was doing what and that was their job. And that kind of rolled into when we started the business. Like it very much kind of came down to that I was looking after getting the product on the market and Annie was looking after selling the thing, like selling it to the customers. And I think just like that role division and like defining what each of us had to do kind of really started it off well, and it still works today that, you know, it's your responsibility to do one thing and you're the boss of what that is. So we never really have disagreements when it comes to that because one of us always has the final say, whatever the role may be.
Looking at Fenu Health, obviously I hope you guys are well aware of what a shining example of a former Young Scientist project turned successful international business that Fenu Health is. And I can imagine that there's a lot of students listening here today who may have ideas or who may have projects right now that they may be starting getting ideas about, or they may be getting told to maybe look at going into business with them. I suppose, Annie, I'll come to you. What would be maybe one or two of the biggest pieces of advice that you would give to a student who may be looking to turn their Young Scientist project into a business idea?
Yeah, I think definitely one of the things we kind of learned very early on was that like never be afraid to ask for help. And I think we always would go to the top people or the top companies and ask for their advice. And you'd be surprised how many will reply and give their advice to you. But I think it was just like obviously we knew very little about the like, to be honest, business at all, never mind our specific industry that we were going into. So it was just having to kind of realize that you could still learn so much from other people, and never thinking like, I mean, not that like we still have so much to learn, to be honest, but just always getting advice, always getting help, never being afraid to ask for help, and then just really persevering as well as another thing, and just not giving up. Like I think it's very easy to kind of like something goes wrong and you kind of just give up on a little bit, but it's just giving it a second attempt and a third attempt if needs be, like, and just keep going because eventually it'll work out, and it'll be worth it. Like it definitely was for us anyway.
Perfect. It's that is sage advice for any person looking to do anything in this world. It's and I suppose, Annie, you touched on perseverance. Now, Kate, when it comes to perseverance, I can imagine that there have been a lot of different times along the Fenu Health journey so far, juggling exams. As you said, like you started it off when you were in junior cert. I can imagine the leaving cert was no means easier for either of you, especially when Fenu Health was starting to scale. How do you manage? How do you keep going during those, I suppose, those times of stress, or if there are a number of different things going on with regards to the project and the other things around this life?
Yeah, so like when it comes to never giving up, that's become our slogan, because when we were doing the Young Scientist, it was our 150-second formula that ended up working. So we always go back and say, like, what could have happened if we'd stopped at 151? And like that comes down to everything. Like you could say, like when we have exams, like it's all about time management, like being able to set the time that you're going to be studying, set the time that you're doing business, and like really not allowing them to overlap, because sometimes like you get ahead of yourself and it can get too hard if you're trying to balance so many things at the same time. Like, we're not supposed to be multitaskers. We can only do one job right at a time. So that's our biggest piece of advice as well, is just never give up, but also time management is key.
Okay, fair enough. And definitely time management, I know as a student myself, it's not remotely as busy as you guys, but time management is something that I am so bad at. So I think that's something that everybody can learn about. It's but I suppose moving on to the young scientist as a whole, Annie, I think everyone knows, who would be a past participant or who anybody who's ever had any experience with the young scientist knows how absolutely diverse all the projects are each and every year. And I suppose with that, there are a certain number of trends, be it climate change or COVID, that may be coming to fruition. What interests you? What do you see as future trends, whether it's in science or whether it's in business, or even something to do with equine health, maybe, that you see, I suppose, being the next big thing potentially?
God, I mean, I just think there's so many different things it could be. Like, I like even think of like 5 years time, we probably won't even be able to comprehend what that will be at this point. Like, you know what I mean? Like, everything is moving so quickly. Especially like, I think the technology aspect of the young scientist has just gotten so much better in the last few years as well. And like, obviously we never got into that, but even just walking around the young scientist every year and seeing the projects is just unreal. Like, I can't even understand like, some of them are just out of this world. And then like, in our industry anyway, like, I know going forward it's kind of just like, when COVID hit, we got a obviously bit of a drop in sales back in March, and then I think we were really taken by surprise by the amount our leisure market grew. So kind of suddenly people who hadn't ridden for 30-40 years getting back into horses and ponies because they'd so much extra time, and like, it was kind of everyone's lives were slowing back down again and into lockdown, and suddenly we were selling to people, to like groups we'd never really gotten into before because they just weren't there. And I mean, we never could have predicted that a year ago. So God knows what will happen in a year's time. I think we've always just trying to kind of evolve with the market as well, and evolve with everything that's happening. Because I guess it's the same in science as it is in business. Like, you're always trying to be one step ahead, really, isn't it?
Yeah. As you said, like, you hit the nail on the head there. I think for any budding young scientist or any budding entrepreneur or anybody really at this stage, it's important to keep evolving with the times. And as we've seen this year, things can change so quickly and in ways that none of us expected before. But I suppose looking into the crystal ball for Fenu Health, and Kate, I'll ask you first and I'll jump over to you, Annie, then after that. Kate, what do you think is next for Fenu Health? What can you tell us?
Yeah, so what's next for Fenu Health? I guess that's always the big question. But like, in the grand scale of things, like, every business always wants to expand their product range, get into more countries, and I think every business this year has had to put all that on hold, especially with COVID. Like, so now it's kind of like, one of the most interesting things we've heard from ourselves and from other businesses is that usually businesses go by like annual basis, like, you know, your annual goals, but many people have broken that now down to quarterly goals due to the changing circumstances. So like, it's so different this year and for the future from what it used to be like. So like, yeah, we're planning on growing into more countries, gaining more products. Like, we've 3 products in research and development that are near the end stages, so hopefully they'll be released in 2021. And it's just kind of like, again, adapting with the market, trying to fit in, like trying to find new innovative ways though as well to break into the market and to get these new customers. But it's definitely to continue building the groundworks, staff, products, and countries, hopefully.
And you, Annie?
Definitely have to agree with everything Kate said. I think we're also, like, recently, the last few months, even just over since lockdown started back in March, we've also been looking into kind of smaller companies and looking at buying a few out or something, just to keep expanding really, and just getting like those new fresh ideas, and really just hopefully keep growing the best we can.
More power to you guys. It's like, you guys are doing absolutely fantastic work. I suppose I'll leave you with this question. With regards with the online circumstances and with the amount of time that we're now spending online, And I don't know whether you have been attending trade conferences or what has been happening in terms of the online sphere for Fenu Health. But what advice would you give to students participating in the Young Scientists? How would you say to them to best leverage the opportunities of, I suppose, networking, learning, engaging online, especially at an event, I suppose, as big as the BT Young Scientists?
Yeah, I think obviously like it is really difficult. I think everyone's found it really difficult having everything moved online. But I think the Young Scientists in particular could actually be a really, really good event online. Like, I mean, it's completely based around science, technology, everything. Like, it really is as good as an event you can get online, I'd say. But I think definitely, like, I mean, judging online with interviews and everything, it's definitely different. And I don't think it ever really gets easier anyway. But I think it's just being prepared and being ready. And I mean, like, I just remember when we were in Young Scientists and everyone used to keep telling us that you're the one that knows the most about your project. Like, the judges are kind of always just there to figure out what you've done, like, you know it inside out, sort of thing. And then like it's just portraying that in any way you can, and trying to do it online at the same time. For fair play to all the applicants this year.
Guys, honestly, all else I have to say is thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us here today. It's great to see these sorts of examples of science turned enterprise turned absolutely crazy innovations that are happening with Fenu Health, and it's always great to see it coming from Irish people. So thank you very much, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks.